But, and back to this is my final slide, and this is sort of a more philosophical point around the role of universities and how they're being managed from the centre. And this pressure that will come down, I think, on universities to be much more business-facing. And what would the risks around that be, given the missions of universities, and the fact that we are still, with one eye to you guys, we are still charities, okay, although we are expected to make wash our faces. Some risks in the future. Well, there is a risk really that we would sacrifice the longer term. This is the blue skies research that on the face of it has absolutely no value to anyone, and yet 15, 20 years down the line is the next big thing. It's the next telecoms breakthrough, the next cure for AIDS. How much of that is sacrificed? How much should be sacrificed? The ultra short term. The US, okay, I showed that graph of the IP exploitation in the United States, which seems to suggest, and I've been in lots of talks where people stand up and say, look at Silicon Valley, it comes out of Stanford, look at the hubs around Boston, MIT, etc. All of that work has generated massive wealth for the US. Well, yes, it has, but how directly is that wealth related really to what universities have actually done, hand on heart? Okay, it's a great story for universities to tell, but we know that some of the firms that came out of Silicon Valley were people in their garages and sheds doing innovative stuff, nothing to do with universities. You can also argue that the reason the US have done so well in the last 20 years is because they just borrowed loads of money from China. Nothing really to do with their IP and university policies. Last 2 points there. It's not the organisations that are innovative, it's the people who work in them. It's the individuals that innovate. And that, I think, the strength of the KTP programme, because it does involve innovative people working between universities and companies. And that's really my final point here, that if you want a good model for a tech transfer thing, it's not really a product, but it is a person. So it will get us back down, I think, to finding the right people to make the right networks to help these things develop. So thank you for your time and enjoy the rest of the day.
Any questions for you?
Just an observation, Nick, really. First of all, it's brilliant. I think you covered an awful lot of very interesting points today, and not least, and I don't think we could go in at enough time, the whole point of whether spin-outs and IP is ever going to make any money, as opposed to the occasional big blockbuster that probably is how Silicon Valley started in the first place. But one of the things that you did mention was that the pressure to work more closely with SMEs, the university. I think the biggest problem that we've faced in the biotech industry has been the costs involved here in the UK, and that's been twofold. One is the markup that universities have put on research, which is far greater than in comparable universities in Europe, and then of course the pound up until recently was so highly priced against the dollar, it was very much more cheaper to go to Stanford and get it done and have the kudos of a big American university behind your research. So I think that could be part of the reason.
Yeah, I think to my experience, there's another one I know people who run small companies up to 500 people in mostly building firms. And the people who do well, these are the sort of people who never bothered with education anyway. They probably left school at 16, certainly an SME, no interest. Why would they want to work? Why would a plumbing firm want to work with the university? The makeup of SMEs. A lot of them aren't really high tech, are they? Certainly in the southwest. I mean, there's sort of farm shops and stuff like that. I mean, what possible reason would they really have to want to work at university and us with them in London? So this idea somehow that has permeated down that SMEs, universities want to work with them.
SMEs don't have much money either. Well, to spend, whereas GlaxoSmithKline does.
Exactly.
I'd like to develop that, if I may. I think the truth is for an SME that it's all right GlaxoSmithKline wanting to work with the university. They may have a dedicated individual, but in a team of 4 or 5, even 10 or 15 people, to invest in the relationship with the university takes up one of a very small team. We heard this morning, the KTN could take up to a year. That's a hell of an investment for an SME. It's a big investment.
Again, building on that, the informal contact route is the easier and more cost-effective solution, where you've got the people already in-house, who come perhaps from the local university or educational establishment, and they can go back and they can touch base with their colleagues that are still going through the process, or tutors or lecturers, and that's far more cost effective from an SME point of view.
Yeah.
Yes, what you can get done for nothing, which is more important than how much you can spend.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, I think I was interested in your model of basically the return on IPR and comparing the difference between the UK and the States. With the UK, I wonder if your model, if you relate to successful products that have been sold, like the Thames, where you own part of the IPR, as a return on revenue for successful products like that must equal something like 90% of your revenue from the rest of it. And isn't this the difference between the States? We put a lot of funding into R&D. We've got very, very little or nothing into taking that product to market. And I think that's the big difference that we have. If you invested further into taking the IP to marketplace, then you would see a 100-fold increase in your IP revenue.
That's a very good point. There has been research, and there's a quite famous research paper called "Where Are the Big Gorillas?" And it's exactly that. It's the fact that there is money available, there's angel funding, etc., to get products on the go.
Angel funding is greedy.
But then there's that gap, isn't there? How do you then get these companies or the IP sustained over the sort of medium term so that you can develop the next Intel, the next Microsoft? And that's what Americans are very good at.
That's where we've got to excel. Bournemouth University should be able to do with that. You've got a very good media department. Put the two together, and industry should benefit from that.
But you raised the point yourself, and that is the starting point. We've only been doing this for 10 years.
Yes.
And up in Southampton did all the work on fibre optics, not a penny. It's having to start at the right time. Whereas Warfarin has been around for 50 years. Is the Wisconsin Alumni Research Foundation, was the University of Madison. So that's been going for 40 or 50 years.
I think the US success needs to be put into some sort of perspective. I was talking to a guy a year or two ago who'd done some research into IP income and profit in the US, and he found that the vast majority of the IP success could be tracked down to about 5% of US universities, and that within that success, the vast majority could be tracked down to one or two products, mostly in pharmaceuticals. So I don't think we should get too impressed by the US.
Actually, it's a very interesting point you raised, because we had on the board at the Enterprise Group in Bristol University a guy who's now on the Kaufman Foundation, I think, from University of Illinois. And he said that, in his opinion, Bristol University, with what they had been doing in their entrepreneurship, was one of the 10 top universities in the United States. And it's absolutely correct. There's only a small group of universities in the States that are really successful at this.
I think that's what I was trying to make with that slide. If that's what I meant by in the wrong hands. If you're getting careful with words here, but you're setting government policy somewhere, and you see these charts, you think, oh, that's obvious. Britain's no good at SIP. Let's put a big drive to make that work. And of course, it's driven by one or two organisations with a small number of people within those organisations. And that will get lost in the sort of averaging of stats that you do to get these figures in the first place.
Thanks, Nick.